last guesses?
When Harry Met Sally was a good guess, yeah.
So it's going to be Lost in Translation.
Oh, well done.
Got it.
Nice.
Totally lost in translation, really.
Yeah.
And once we've pivoted the message to more so something less about quantity of sleep and more about quality of sleep. The fact that, maybe you can only sleep 6 hours a night, we can make those 6 hours high quality. Just by making that small shift, it created a huge difference. And as a result, that really, I guess that was probably the first great growth moment for Koala in Japan. So I think, but yeah, I guess just really understanding the cultural differences is very, very important here. I would say.
So yeah, culture affects behavior, and behavior, affects how people search. And so data is really important.
Yeah. And the order of names and the ability to see your full name the way it should be shown, that's so key. That's so important when you're using a product. If a brand isn't getting that right, why would you stay?
One thing we did early on, we made a lot of effort to localize the mattress itself. The way people sleep here is quite different to Australia. And in short, I would say people in Japan, because we have a culture of sleeping on the floor, on futons, etc., we prefer a firmer mattress.
Palatable, especially in the product development world. The culture in Singapore is very different and unique, because rather than people filling out their 9 to 6, 9 to 5 working hours, they're very reactive and proactive at what they do.
So much, even in Singapore, right? You have just so much talent, very creative minds, right? These very internationally kind of wired, young, talented people who want to do things differently. They want to break things a little bit. They want to shake it up a little bit. They're no longer necessarily going after the great titles or some kind of lifelong careers. They really want to tap into the startup ecosystem. And
with more distance, like in Arabic, you don't want to have that connection. People are not going to be comfortable with that. So the intent is still the same, to say, hey, yeah, I really like what you're doing for me. Or I really like you personally. But the response will be, oh, I love this love. Initially, we had single shot responses that were very celebratory of the user identity or what the user was sharing. But we identified the need to disambiguate, because in some cases, people were not celebrating. They were coming out to the assistant because they didn't have anybody else to come out to, or they didn't feel like they can trust someone else, or they were just looking for support. But during the pandemic, when people were in lockdown, Carnival was canceled, and they were celebrating Carnival at home. So we created a song here to allow people to still be joyful during this joyful time.
Eu vou ficar em casa neste carnaval, vou desfilar alegria no meu quintal, jogar pra cima, confete serpentina.
Countries. In addition to that, you would find that usually we have the concept of official languages and national languages. And so usually you would find that the official languages are those languages that are used in administration, in offices, and so on and so forth. Sometimes they are African languages, but other times, or most often, they are colonial languages. It's interesting because there's so much linguistic diversity. So if we take a country like Nigeria, for instance, which is in West Africa, can you imagine that there are about 500 indigenous African languages spoken just in Nigeria? Several challenges. Of course, there are opportunities, because just like the case of Singapore, the continent has over 60% of its population that is aged under 35, right? So it's a very youthful population.
Kind of business. And just bearing in mind that if you don't find a company that does something similar or exactly what you're doing, just know that the regulatory climate is going to be a lot more stiffer than, if there was already someone there doing what you're doing on the continent. And then if you're working in the translation and localization industry, if you're going to be translating text, audio, then you know that you're going to have to comply with copyright laws in Nigeria.
We're going to talk about the intersection between localization and accessibility. It's the first time we're actually hosting a live sign language interpreter, Civ design, right? And so if we think about it in these ways, the conversation about localization is much wider and shifts from being a tail-end language production discussion to an upfront strategic and product inclusive design development at the beginning of the journey. So
these two areas of product development and companies that are going into various markets. And really, you have to think about accessibility as yet another aspect of delivering a truly localized experience for individual customers, right? And so
they felt that it was so similar that the skills and the processes that we had in localization would be a natural asset to managing accessibility as well.
Fashion, we typically think about different aspects of impairments, from the visual to hearing to motion or physical, and then cognitive is a very interesting one as well. And then that matrix shows that for each of them, there is a permanent one, probably something you were born with or you're carrying for the rest of your life, or there is a temporary one, so maybe you broke your hand, or a situational one, like holding a baby or driving a car. And the reason...
So guiding principles that we used, most of us here will know the web content accessibility guidelines. We follow the POUR model, that's POUR, which is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Zoom also has its own internal design principles, which is SUIT or SUIT, keeping features and design elements simple, unified, inclusive, and transparent. Our designer actually extensively used something called the universal design principles of the Conference of Interpreter Trainers. So and that's where we said we want this to be a process that's owned by the consumer, by the customer, to say, hey, maybe we are based in the US, but we don't use ASL interpretation. We're going to use a secondary sign language, and we have the ability to easily change that label of the floating window very quickly in an agile way.
Big enterprises. But then we committed ourselves to create inclusive products. So not only stay with compliance, because you can still be compliant and per guidelines, but you're not going to be truly inclusive and truly accessible for some of the people. And then on top of that, how are we creating a culture? So we are shifting accessibility left. So as early in the process for every department in the company to think and include accessibility in whatever it is that they're doing. And
secondly, have a website that's already translated. For those of you that don't know, unlike Google, where you click an ad and then go to a website, with Baidu, you actually stay within the platform. So if you already have that content translated, you can establish your presence on Baidu's platform called Jimuyu, so that when someone does click those ads, they're able to access that same content.
77% of internet users use WeChat. So, whenever we're working with companies who are interested in China, this platform always comes up, regardless of whether it's a B2B or a B2C play.
And in short, you know how in the West we say when we love somebody, we say, I give you my heart. The Berbers say, I give you my liver.